Okay, now that we've done the geometry tab, I want to move on to the areas tab. But I just want to explain how I created the Forest Pro object we're going to be using. So I selected the Forest Pro object, I hit generate, and I selected the surface. Once that's selected, you have your modify panel, open up your Forest Pro object, and you'll see on surfaces, we now have this surface, and in areas, we have a surface area. I then went to geometry and I added in these three objects by clicking this plus and clicking each one in. That's all I've done. So let's move on to the areas tab and explain all the features you can do with this. So the areas tab is basically what it says it is. It's the areas in which you populate your objects onto your surface. So how do we do that? I have a few splines here. On this first button here, you click this and you can add a spline. Again, it's similar to the other objects where this is highlight, and the first spline I select will populate that scene. So if I select this line and move it around, this surface will populate where this spline is. Now, if I go back to my Forest Pro object, you'll have a few options now with that include. So we have force open spline and thickness. These work in tandem with each other. So if I click this, something's changed. What has changed? So now it's considering this spline open. So this thickness says from this point on, go out 10 meters both sides. So if I change this now, make a bit more sense, just to 1 meter or so, you can see it populates along the edge, the line of that spline, because it thinks it's open. Now I'm going to select this again, and you'll see this setting now does nothing because it only works with open splines. Now, how do we add a spline to exclude an area? Well, the exact same pretty much. We're going to click this button, we're going to add this spline, and then I'm going to change it to an exclude. So now when we move this spline, it excludes the objects. Perfect, simple and straightforward enough. So now I'm going to switch the surface back on. By default, you might have had it on. This is off for me. So if I select that, you'll see this whole surface is populated. And why is my surface blue and red? Well, if I select here, you'll notice that material ID 1 is red and 2 is blue. So I can select this Forest Pro object and I can tell it, oh, I only want it to be in 1. And you can see it only populates in surface ID 1. Same with changing it to 2. We have it just in 2. You can do both by doing 1, 2, and you have it in both. And save you the complex scene with many surface IDs, you can see how this can be very handy. You can also go select models and choose pick. And you can select the objects you only want to see. So it can be quite handy and quite powerful. I'm going to move on to boundary checking. Basically what that is, and you can see it more so in a render, but point is its default, it's fine, it'll work great. But if you find that the edges are a bit jagged, you might want to switch it to edge, and that will give you that sharp, long edge. So now I'm going to show you how you can add objects, but in areas when you add objects, they can only be exclude. So once I click up here, same as we're selecting the splines, except we're selecting one just next to it, you'll see that exclude is the only option we have. And it's highlighted none, so the next object I select is going to be added in. So once I bring the object in and select it, you'll see we've excluded those objects. Now, if I go to the front view, you'll notice that it's excluded a bit further than you think, but it's actually going from this point here down, and same here. But what if you wanted to bring this in a bit further? Well, that's where these other options in. You can hit this top limit button and you can start bringing this down. Now be careful, there is a glitch. Be very careful. If this goes to 0, it will crash your scene. So be careful of that. So use this cautiously. So you can bring this in and then we have those objects closer. This could be, say, for a house and the roof extends, but you want to obviously have the grass reach all the way to the perimeter of the house. I'm going to uncheck that so I don't crash my scene. And that's pretty much it you need for the object. Again, you can use the density for it as well. If I was to select density here, you can then go to exclude and you can bring this up and down and you can start creating wherever you want. Say the edge of a road and you want the leaves there, you can do that there. You can actually add Forest Pro objects to your areas panel. And to do that, you go up here and you select what looks like a tree, which is the forest. Click here and you can select the forest per object, which I've created. There's just like cylinders, but for this example, we'll call them tree stumps. Okay, so I'm going to add those in. And then say all the other forest per objects surrounding it could be leaves. So let's create leaves falling at the bottom of a tree. So what you can do once you've added this forest per object, you can, if you want, go for scale here and you can start bringing this up, but that's going to have the opposite effect we want. You can see that the objects are going away from those other forest per objects. You might want that for grass, but we want leaves example. So how do we do the opposite of that? So let's set this back to 100%. And this is where we can use the fall off and check the density. Okay, so let's then increase the exclude. So once I start increasing the exclude, you can see that effect happening. Just at the bottom, we're seeing the objects populate. And that's how you can add a forest project and see how powerful it can be on the objects you can create. Now I want to show the last bit of the areas tab, which is the paint tool. Okay, so I'm going to delete this and then hide my object. And then I'm going to turn off my surface. So again, I'm going to click up here and add a paint tool. So I'm going to go click the paint tool, set your brush size, and you can start painting on your surface where you want objects. So it seems to be a bit of a glitch there, but it seems to be working okay. It seems to be flashing in and out, so you can ignore that. I need to collect density. And that's what was causing that issue. So I can paint in, and happy days, we can paint in and it looks great. Now what we can do is we can also do an eraser, and we can actually delete where we don't want. Very handy and very powerful. So I'm going to add in another paint layer and make an exclude. And then I can start doing the exact opposite where I paint away from objects. So overall, what we've done with the areas tab is we've added splines. We can make them an include and exclude. I've added an object, which can only be an exclude in the areas tab. Then I've added a forest per object, and I've added paint layer. Don't need to worry about this just yet. We'll maybe approach this a bit later. It's just not too important in this beginner's course. But that's basically the areas tab. It's where you can populate your surface using splines, paint tools, and forest per objects. So I hope that's been helpful, and let's move on to the surfaces tab.